not scared. Because that is the key to successfully riding out and going through one of these events. Before we get started, we do want to point out a few things. If in the facility here tonight, if you go straight to the back, there are ladies' restrooms and men's restrooms straight to the back. If we needed to evacuate this facility for any reason, all of these doors with push bars are open. You're just going to push one of those and get out in a safe and orderly manner. If we need to shelter in place for any reason, we're just going to stay right here. Okay? So that's really the basics of what you need to know. But I did want to tell you a little bit about what to expect this evening. Here in just a few moments, we're going to hear from the National Weather Service. Meteorologist Dan Riley is going to give us this year's tropical weather forecast. I'm going to come back and tell you a little bit about staying connected and informed during an event, whether that's a named storm or not. We want you to stay connected to the city so you can stay safe. Then we're going to hear from Weston King with Animal Services because we do have our pets are part of our family. We want to make sure that our plans do incorporate our pets, and that we're prepared for that. And then Mount Bellevue Fire Department is going to tell you a little bit about you getting ready, getting your home ready. City engineering, Francisco Carrillo is our city engineer, and he's going to explain a little bit about why things happen the way they happen here in Mount Bellevue. And even with some of the recent weather that we've seen, some people have had questions. Well, we have answers. A lot of this is designed this way with a purpose. So we're thankful that Francisco's here to talk about that. Our partners at Chambers County and Chambers County Health Department are going to talk a little bit about their role during a large event. And then John Cepeda from One Oak is going to also talk about industry. So that, because we do have a lot of industry here, and it's a unique perspective. How does industry get ready when we know we have a storm coming in? What steps do they take to keep their plants secure and also to help our community stay safe? So that's really what you can expect. But before I bring up Dan, I do want to acknowledge that we've got our mayor here, Joe McWilliams, and our city manager, Brian Winningham, is here. So thank you both for being here and being a part of tonight's workshop. Well, that's enough for me for now, because what you really want to see is our first presenter this evening from the National Weather Service, Houston Galveston area office, meteorologist Dan Riley.
Thanks all, and great to have a good crowd out tonight. Here we are facing another hurricane season. Of course, we know it doesn't take a hurricane to have wild weather around here. A lot of our April and May periods can be active as they are this year. So many of us just in the last month or so have gone through floods, high winds, severe storms, even some tornadoes. But tonight we're going to focus more on hurricanes. The cover slide here actually shows a storm back in 1961, Hurricane Carla. This was the Weather Service radar there out of Freeport, I believe. And this was one of the first hurricanes that was documented on radar. You can see the eye of Carla approaching the coastal bend area and some of the flooding that it caused down in the Freeport area. So when is hurricane season? You know, everybody says starts June 1st, ends November 30th. What this chart here shows is sort of a timeline from May 1st through the end of December. And the way this map is created, sometimes called a flame map, only the way it looks, is you go to a calendar date and you count up the number of storms over the last 100 years or so that were in the Atlantic on that date. So what you see is, right here in late May, we sometimes see a few storms in the Atlantic. And so don't be surprised if we see something even prior to June 1st. And then as we go through June and July, not a whole lot going on. The tropics are sort of simmering we peak around September 12th or 13th, and then on the backside of that, the activity slowly declines through the month of October. Now, one thing I want to add here is the water temperatures, the ocean waters, are about as warm as they normally are now in August. So it'll be interesting to see if things ramp up sooner. Hopefully not. You know, hurricane season is long and soon enough as it is. So we'll see how that goes. But if we can get to October in Texas, we're usually in good shape. Late season storms are more likely to be nudged to the east, especially if we have a front or two coming through. And I'm waiting for that next cold front. Months away, probably. So we categorize the hurricanes by the category, Cat 1 through Cat 5. We rate them based on the wind speed, right? And you can tell by that quick image there, Cat 5 is a whole lot different than Cat 1. But Cat 1 is pretty strong to begin with. You can look at the table there. Some people say, oh, it's just a Cat 1, or oh, it's just a Cat 2. But look at that, Category 1, sustained winds, 74 to 96 miles per hour. You know, that's pretty severe, with higher gusts. So every hurricane needs to be taken seriously as far as the wind hazard. Then Cat 2 all the way up to Cat 5. Now we define Cat 3 through Cat 5 as a major. We call that a major hurricane. It's just a definition. It doesn't mean Category 2 is not major. But I'll come back to that later on. So just have that in the back of your mind. Major is defined as Cat 3 through Cat 5. So what this map shows is the formation location of all of these hurricanes dating back to 1878, as near as we can tell. Of course, satellites came on board in the late 1950s, early 60s. So those very early season historic hurricanes, it's less certain, you know, that we're capturing all of that. Nonetheless, you can see that you can get named storm formation that includes, well, in this case, these are all hurricanes. Cat 1 to 2 hurricane in blue, Cat 3 to 5 hurricane in red. And what you see is a lot of storms form out over the Atlantic, but very many form right over the Gulf. Keep that in mind. Most of our hurricanes here in Texas actually develop in the Gulf and come in. Ike was an exception. We were able to track it for a few weeks, right? But more often than not, that thing is forming in the Gulf and coming in within a few days. Something like a Hurricane Alicia back in 1983. It was nothing, and then it was a Cat 3 landfall just 48 hours later. So these things can happen quickly. Now is the time to prepare, is kind of the key message there. Don't wait till there's something forming in the Gulf. By then, you'll really be scrambling. Now, looking back at recent years, we've had a lot, you may have noticed this, we've had a lot of very intense hurricanes making landfall all along the Gulf Coast. Take a look at these 7 landfalling Cat 4 and 5. These are the most intense hurricanes as measured by wind. Just in the period of 2017 to 22, there's been 7 in that time frame, and in fact, we had another one last year. Idalia, another Cat 4 landfall. So that's 8 landfalling U.S. Cat 4 and 5 hurricanes since 2017. 8. That's more than we had in the preceding 53 years. Think about that. In the last 6 years, we've had more than the previous 53. So there seems to be a trend toward more intense hurricanes, especially in the Gulf. Also, a lot of these are rapid developers. You know, what I mean by that is they may go from a tropical storm or a Category 1 to a Category 4 very quickly. So, and you see here in our part of the Gulf Coast area, we were kind of in between. Harvey down the coast and Laura just off to the east. Both those were close calls for us. And you kind of get the feeling that, you know, eventually we're going to have to face one of these. Hopefully not this year, hopefully no time soon. They seem to be more frequent, and you know, fingers crossed we can avoid that again this year. Here's another interesting chart. I actually saw this recently online. These are the U.S. Category 5 landfall. We're talking about Hurricane Camille back in the 1960s, Michael back in 2018, Labor Day storm in 1935, Andrew in 92. And an interesting point here, all of these Category 5s were not even hurricanes 3 days prior. So you get the theme here. These things can form quickly, become very intense quickly. You got to be prepared before they form. So you have a plan, you have a kit, you know what to do. So when this thing is developing quickly, you already are taking the appropriate action. Let's take a look at Hurricane Ike. How many of y'all were here for Hurricane Ike in 2008? How many were not here for Hurricane Ike? All right, so there are a fair number of new people here. I was actually new to the area when Hurricane Ike came in. And you can see on the radar loop there, let's play it again, this big swirl, this really huge hurricane coming in off the Gulf. Right about at this point here, it takes a little jog to the right, takes it right over Galveston Bay, right over Mont Belvieu. The center of that eye came right over us. Anytime you get a direct hit like this from a hurricane, you're going to get the highest winds in the storm. So Ike was our last direct hit from a hurricane. Prior to that, you have to go back to Hurricane Alicia back in 1983. Anyone here for Alicia back in 83? Quite a few people in the room. How about Carla in 61? Anyone? We've got a few here. How about the 1943 hurricane? Now, I only bring that up because I just did a talk like this in the city of Galveston. There was a couple there who had recollection of the 1943 hurricane, so that was pretty amazing. We do this talk in Morgan's Point. Same thing there. The gentleman remembers that story. So every hurricane, every tropical storm is different. All right, and everyone remembers the previous one, and it's almost never the same as the next one. So if you think about it, there's these 5 different hazards: damaging winds, flooding rains, high surf, storm surge flooding. What is storm surge? That's the storm pushing water onto land, and tornadoes. And if you just go back to recent history, Harvey, that was all about flooding rains and some tornadoes. Not much storm surge, not much wind. Flip that over, Hurricane Ike. Tremendous storm surge, tremendously high winds, power outages. Not that much rain. There was a decent amount of rain, but compared to Harvey, nothing like it. So every storm is different. Now, of these hazards, what do you all think is the most dangerous of these 5? Anyone have a thought on that? Flood. I heard it's flooding, right? Anyone else? It is. It's the water-related hazards. If you look at storm surge flooding and flooding rains, those are the ones that are the most dangerous. And that's what this pie chart is showing, is if there is a fatality, what hazard leads to that? And about half storm surge. About a quarter flooding rains. And then wind, which everyone thinks of with a hurricane, is only about 8%, tornado about 3%. So keep that in mind. And so when you look at the region as a whole, you really want to get people out of the storm surge zones. Make sure they get out of harm's way. If you're looking at an Ike-type storm or a 1900 hurricane-type storm, you want to get people out of the surge zones because that's such a dangerous situation. So let's talk now about Hurricane Ike. I was new to the area back in 2008. I had worked hurricanes back in Virginia, North Carolina. In between, I spent a few years in Montana, free from hurricanes. I was happy about that. But we had hurricane force winds sliding down the Rocky Mountains, so you just can't escape this wild weather in different parts of the country. Here's a snapshot, Hurricane Ike. This is during landfall. What is the center of the hurricane called? Do y'all know? Sitting over the bay there?
The eye.
The eye, right. And are the winds high or low in the eye of the hurricane?
Higher.
Yeah, they're really low. And so In fact, the eye came over the Weather Service in Lake City, which is where we're located. It came over Mount Bellevue. Did any of y'all experience the eye? Were you here when the storm came through? Quite a few. And sure enough, you have really strong winds in the ring around the eye. That's called the eye wall. But when the eye comes over, everything gets really eerily calm. And I know a lot of emergency managers, first responders, they were out assessing damage during the eye. But then you got to shelter quick, because on the back side of that, you get really strong winds from the opposite direction. So keep this in mind. If the eye wall passes over your area, you get the high winds. If you miss it, if you miss the eye wall, the winds usually aren't going to be nearly as strong. And so if you look at the path of Ike, if you were down in western Missouri County or even western Fort Bend County, the winds weren't nearly as strong, and the wind damage wasn't nearly as bad. So it turns out all those hazards I talked about, most of them are worse near and to the right of the track. We call that side of the storm, there's a name for it, anybody know? The so-called dirty side of the storm. And when it's time for my family to evacuate, like with Ike, the first goal is to get them inland. The second goal, I try to guide them left of the track for that reason. And so, where do you find the worst of it? The ring around the eye, that's where you have the highest winds. The spiral bands, shown here as well, on the right-hand side, that's where you find tornadoes and heavy rain. And the storm surge tends to be worse near and to the right of the track as well. Why is that? Well, the storm is circulating counterclockwise. So on the right side, all those winds are blowing onshore. On the left side, they tend to be blowing offshore. So you can see why that you get more water pushed onshore on the right-hand side of the track. So let's talk a little bit more now about the storm surge threat. Question, is Mont Bellevue in a surge? Do we have a surge risk here in Mont Bellevue? And so we can kind of address that with surge modeling that I'll show you now. First, I want to show you kind of a big picture view of the Gulf Coast. This is kind of a worst case, category 5 in any given area. The way this map is made is there's about 500 different parallel category 5 hurricanes run along the coast. And the highest of any of those is plotted on the map. So what you see here, big picture, is the Gulf Coast has a vulnerability to storm surge. If you get a little bit inland, you're out of the storm surge zone. But if we focus on our area now, here's a look at Galveston Bay. I'll put is the cursor showing up there? Oh, you can see Mont Bellevue on that map. I'm going to try to get fancy here. So I'll just put this little laser pointer there. Yeah, good, it shows up. So here's kind of a Cat 1 storm surge worst case. And what you see is, coastal Chambers County is underwater. It's a very low-lying area, so the storm is able to push salt water pretty far inland, even with a Category 1 storm. But areas around here, not doing too bad. There is some water up into Trinity Bay. Here's kind of a worst case Cat 3. So think about a Category 3 version of Ike coming on up. And now you see there's a lot of populated areas along Galveston Bay on the western shore. Look at Port Chambers County, and this is similar to what they saw with Ike. The seawater pushing really halfway up the county. Now, if you remember Ike, there was all kinds of debris at the inland extent of this surge. And so you had these huge debris piles stacked up there. There was even some vegetative debris on the I-10 bridge there, brought about by the high winds and the storm surge pushing up in there. But even with this, Mont Bellevue is for the most part high and dry. And then, you almost hate to show this. This is a Category 5 worst case. And so, we never want to see anything like this happen. A tremendous amount of, the red areas are greater than 10 feet of seawater above ground. And so, this is just a nightmare scenario. But what's kind of interesting is Mont Bellevue, true to its name, is sort of high, right? Mont Bellevue. It sort of dawned on me as I was making these maps. This added elevation you have in this jurisdiction actually helps in that sense, that you're less vulnerable to storm surge. And certainly all our neighbors, to the south and all around us that are just a bit lower are having really big storm surge problems. So let's talk now about the forecast for this year. And there's a few things that go into that. One is, what phase of this El Nino Southern Oscillation are you in? Now, that's a lot of words, right? El Nino is a situation where the waters are warm near the equator in the eastern Pacific, like we have on this side here in this model. La Nina is just the opposite. The waters are very cold near the equator in the eastern Pacific. And you're probably thinking, what does that have anything to do with hurricanes in the Atlantic? It turns out that pattern in sea surface temperatures influences thunderstorm development in those areas, which then has impacts on jet streams and airflow across the globe. So, bottom line is, El Nino tends to have fewer hurricanes in the Atlantic. There's more wind shear where the storms develop. La Nina, we tend to have more hurricanes and storms in the Atlantic. So what are we looking at this year? Unfortunately, we're going from an El Nino last year to a La Nina this year. So that would argue for more storms this year. The other thing we have going against us is the water temperatures in what we call the main development region, and you can kind of see it blocked off here. This is the area out over the equator between 10 and 20 degrees north, 85 and 20 degrees west, sort of through the Caribbean, out on through the open Atlantic. Honestly, like I said earlier, a lot of our storms form in the Gulf of Mexico for that matter. But at any rate, so where are we tracking on the water temperatures in this region? Well, here's the plot for this year, and you can compare that to all the other years. We're way warmer than we really ever have been in those waters, even now, May 15th. So, we're off the charts there. Now, if we take this curve off and compare it to the blue line, which is our average, you can see the temperatures in that development region actually look more like late July to early August, even now. So, bottom line is, we have the warm water, we have the La Nina, so it's not surprising that the forecasts for the season are for a lot of storms. Now, does that mean we're going to get in Texas? We don't have any way to say. Best case scenario, they all track out to sea. But we need to prepare every year, and this year, we're going to have probably a lot of storms that we're going to be monitoring. These are actually some of the numbers put up by Colorado State. The NOAA forecast for the hurricane season is coming out this week. Hasn't been issued yet, but we're pretty confident it's going to look something like this. The average number of named storms, hurricanes, and tropical storms is 14. The forecast this season is for 23. So think about that, 23 versus the average of 14. The number of hurricanes forecast is 11 versus 7 being the average. So again, those forecasts are, as we would expect, for well above normal activity in the Atlantic. Now, a big part of getting prepared, and there's going to be some great speakers tonight talking about how to do that, is staying informed. And we want you all to plug into the National Weather Service. Our job is to let you know what's coming. Is it a surge storm? Is it more of a heavy rain flood threat? Is it something you really don't have to worry about? We're going to be addressing all of this in the information we put out on the web, on social media. We even do webinars for our emergency managers. And we record those and put them out for you all to hear too. So, we're not going to hype anything unnecessarily, but we're going to tell you when you need to worry, when you don't, so you can make the right decisions. This particular slide is a slide we put out for Harvey before it started raining at all. And of course, that's the case when we really are sounding the alert, talking about devastating flooding, 15 to 30 inches, locally 40 inches of rain. So again, when the time comes, then we have to use that kind of wording, we will. But that's very, very sparingly. And we don't want you to get caught off guard. I've read many accounts, and people were like, yeah, no one had any idea it was going to be that bad. And we're like, oh no, because we want y'all to be informed to make good decisions. The other thing here is if you go to our website, weather.gov/Houston, you can get our preparedness guide, and there is a QR code for that now. But the jurisdictions will also, I believe, link this to their websites. But if you follow our social media, you go to our website, there's all kinds of preparedness checklists, tracking maps, evacuation zone maps, some of which I think will be talked about tonight by other speakers. And you can get that in that document. And also, there's some great handouts here tonight on getting alerts. And so there's a lot of good resources out there to be informed. So that's all I have. Does anyone have any questions for me? I hate to be the gloom and doom messenger here. All right, thanks everyone.